So for today's experiment, we're going to be covering experiment 2, and it's called, or lab 2, and it's called lab 2 doorbell and light controller. Okay, so for the first experiment, what we want to do is what we want to accomplish is we have our circuit here. There's going to be 3 labs: the buzzer, the 1 push button, 1 LED, 2 push buttons, 1 LED. And now our microcontroller, we're operating with a microcontroller, the small board. And if you can see, we got our pins connected. Okay, we got our ground and then our power. Well, we have a 5-volt voltage supply and a 3.3 voltage supply. Okay, so then now let's start with for this experiment. For the first experiment, we want that buzzer to go on anytime we push that push button. So when I push this push button, you're gonna hear a little buzzing sound. See if we can hear it. Focus. Okay. So you should hear it. Anytime I push it down, we hear that buzzing sound. When I let go, buzzing sound is off. Okay, so just to describe my connection here really quick. So we got that the push button connected to the one of the port pins. Then we have it grounded. Then we have then separately we have the buzzer. We have our transistor right there, our 2020 ohm resistor. Not focusing. And yeah, so that's for experiment 1. Now, a much more clear connection would be this one, given to us by our professor. So if you can see, we got that transistor, the resistor, the push button, our 5 volts supply, 3.3, ground, and ground is coming from the Tiva board. So you can see that connection. All right. So then this is our source code. Let me explain the source code on how this is possible. Is we got our libraries up here, all the libraries we're going to use, and then something unique about this is it's actually a good idea to separate your projects much more organized, is use function calls, right? So we have our doorbell, our room light, which is going to be our second experiment, stairwell light control, and then we got our delays that will eventually go back into our loop. Okay, so first let me walk through the GPIO configuration. So this right here is our GPIO configuration. It's gonna it's enabling all the ports and the pins. As you can see, we're gonna use port E, port B, and port A, and then we are going to use pins 2, 3, and 4. We're using direction of the pin, which is going to be, the direction is going to be either it's an output or an input. Okay, for the inputs, we got to put down resistor or put up resistor, and then in general we got to enable all the pins, so we use this right here to enable the register. Okay, so then for the doorbell, so this is my code for the doorbell. I just made a little note here on how to turn on the buzzer, and like what if just making notes to see what the input is, like, oh yeah, just to remind myself, oh yeah, the switch is an input. Okay, so for the first line, we got that if statement. So if our GPIO, which is port E, data and bit 1. So essentially what's happening here, we're using that logic gate 1. So if this is true, this is true. So if the output inside this if statement is true, which is going to be 1, so then it's gonna be 1, obviously. So it's gonna enter that if statement. So if you can see here, so we're reading this right here, the GPIO dash less than data and underscore bit 1 should be equivalent to bit 1. Bit 1 we know is 1, and this we're reading the port and the pin. So once we enter that if statement, then we're gonna turn on that buzzer, which is what's making that buzzing sound, right? So if not, so if that if statement is false, we're gonna jump onto our else, which is essentially gonna turn off, or it's gonna send our output to be 0, so it's not gonna complete the circuit, which is why our buzzer is off. Okay, so that's hopefully I explained it okay, and this makes sense, and see you in experiment 2.